You're listening to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast, episode 107. Welcome to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Paula Price, lawyer turned certified executive coach. This podcast was created to empower women lawyers just like you to create a life and practice you love. Join me every week for a break from the hustle so we can focus on you, what you truly want, and how you can create it. If you're over the overwhelm, done with putting out fires, and ready to redefine success on your own terms, you're in the right place. Ready for today's episode? Let's dive in. Hello, my friend. Welcome back to the podcast. It's Paula here, and I'm so glad to have you here with me this week. Welcome. I am delighted to have you and so happy to be talking about mid-year with you. If you're listening to this podcast when it goes live, we will be at the beginning of June 2023. So we are getting close to that midpoint of the year. What that means is if you're in the Northern Hemisphere like me, your days are getting longer. You're on the verge of summer. If you have kids like I do, they are getting very excited, counting down the weeks and soon the days to when their teachers will let them out for the summer. And I think it's a wonderful, wonderful time to regroup, recalibrate, refresh, reset, and reassess, all in preparation for how we want to spend the balance of the year. And that's what we're going to talk about in today's podcast. Now, before I dive into the substance of today's discussion, I really want to encourage you to sign up for a free webinar that I am putting on Thursday, June 15th at noon Pacific time. The registration information will be on the page that this podcast is hosted on the joyfulpractice.com website, and there will be a link to it in the show notes. If for whatever reason you can't find the link, just send me a note and I will send it to you. We are going to spend an hour doing pretty much what we're talking about today, only we will be doing it live. It will be interactive, as one can be interactive in a Zoom context. So I'll be asking you questions and guiding you through a discussion with the goal of helping you recalibrate and set yourself up for success for the balance of 2023. I will also be talking about a group program that I will be offering starting beginning of July. So you can see how this ties up really nicely with this concept of the second 6 months of the year and being really intentional and focused about how you want those 6 months to unfold. I feel like there's a lot of fanfare that takes place at the end of the year and at the beginning of the year, and I'm speaking about the calendar year in terms of wrapping things up and getting things set, New Year's resolutions, and that type of fanfare, those types of goals that we set at the beginning of the year, but not as much is said about the middle of the year. And so that's really where I see a lot of opportunity for us to step in, be really intentional. I know that summer is around the corner and that is probably taking up a lot of your headspace, but a little bit of time invested now can have a big payoff later. So please do join me for the webinar. And if you're interested, please do join me for the course. The course is really wonderful. It's something that I created. It's kind of like a gift. You know, when you buy a gift for somebody and you think this is something that I would really, really love to have for myself, but I probably would never buy it. This course is basically that. It's a program that I designed that I am so pleased to offer. It's based on what I have loved in coaching programs that I have been part of. I've tried to incorporate those things all together to create a container, to create a community. We had 8 women lawyers go through the program this year, and they are just incredible. And I love the work that we've done together. And so I'm keen to create another opportunity to have a 6-month experience of coaching and sharing ideas and going through a structured program. So there's themes every month. We start out with goal setting. We then move into self-concept. We talk about obstacles. And I mentioned in last week's podcast that I think obstacles are really neat in the sense that everybody has a different obstacle, and your obstacles are such a great way of learning more about yourself, what your strengths are and what your challenges are. They are unique to you. We talked about confidence, authority, and power. We just finished up the month on boundaries. And finally, we're finishing off with sustainable growth. So we will be doing the same topics starting in July and moving through to December. And if this is something that catches your attention, again, please do reach out to me. The course registration page will be on the page that hosts this podcast episode. And of course, if you want further information, I will be able to send that to you. So without further ado, let's dive into what we can do with the mid-year. What kind of reset, recalibration, reassessment, revamping we can do at this point of the year to set ourselves up for success for the balance of 2023. Now, the way I see it, as I've alluded to earlier, we have no problem. We have no problem with New Year's resolutions and the concept of New Year's resolutions. And I think that the new year has kind of taken a monopoly over the goal setting time of year, right? And I think I love New Year's. I set a word of the year. I set goals for myself at the beginning of the year. And if you do the same, wonderful. This is a great time to reflect on the goals you set earlier, to revisit them, to recalibrate as you need to. But what can sometimes happen is we get so excited in the moment. We do our New Year's resolutions, and then life happens and we may stick to them for a couple of weeks, but then by February, March, we've kind of lost sight of our goals. We've kind of abandoned them. We've kind of gotten into that all or nothing thinking trap, and we've pretty much given up, and we don't really think about resolutions or goals until December of the following year, where we then decide, you know what, those resolutions that I had last year, I really should make a better effort this year. I'm going to set them again, etc. And so if we set our goals in January without really having a check-in point, then we can really miss out on opportunities that come up along the course of the year to reboot, to recalibrate, to get focused back on what it is that we truly want. Now, you may be in the category of person who has quarterly goals, and you may check in every 3 months and assess where you're at. And you may have that discipline, in which case that is amazing. This is another opportunity for you to have a check-in at the 6-month point. But if you are like many of us who sets goals, but then life happens and you don't have those check-ins in the way that you would like to, then today's podcast episode is a great opportunity for you to reflect on where you're at and where you want to go. An analogy that you might think about, this is one that came to mind for me as I was preparing for today, is the electrical lines that you see outside on the street. So as you know, there are poles that hold electrical lines up in the air, and they're placed at a certain distance apart. So if you look at your year and you think there are 2 poles, one on either end of the year, supporting the year that's in the middle, you might notice that around the middle, it gets a little bit droopy. And so the point here today is to erect another pole, one that's smack dab in the middle, that will support you, so that in the goals you have for yourself for the year, you've got a check-in point midway that will help you to stay focused, to stay aligned, and create what you want, so that on December 31st, you can look back and be really satisfied with the way that your year went. Now, the reason that I think people aren't making mid-year goals quite to the same extent as they are at the beginning of the year is really a function of 2 things. Number one is marketing. If you look at all the buildup that goes into the new year, there is a ton of it. I mean, number one, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, your days are short. That whole December season is usually pretty dark. It's usually pretty cold. We are desperate for something to look forward to. So if you celebrate Christmas, there's Christmas. If you celebrate Hanukkah, there's Hanukkah. If you celebrate another festive time of year, then you celebrate that. And that kind of allows you to create the connection and the warmth and the joy and the brightness that may be lacking in our physical surroundings. You know, these short days, cold weather, wet weather, whatever that looks like for you. And you also, at the end of the year, may experience a little bit of that. You know, some people call it the holiday bloat, right? So usually from around the beginning of December until the end of December, there's a lot of festiveness that goes on. So holiday parties, family parties, gatherings, there's a lot of food. Starbucks changes its cups, and all of a sudden you've got all the pumpkin, peppermint, gingerbread, latte, whatever they are. And it's a time of excess and indulgence. And so by the time January 1st rolled around, we are all so done with maxing out our credit cards to buy all the things for all the people. And we are done with all the eating. We don't need to see gingerbread for another year. Thank you very much. We are done with the parties. We are done with the wine and all of it. And so it's this perfect opportunity there's a clean slate. There's all of our sins, if you want to call them that we can now repent for effective January 1st. And so there's all this buildup. There's all this marketing. And we start out with all this excitement because we've got the promise of a fresh year. If you record hours, you've got, a fresh, clean timesheet. You're starting at the beginning. Whatever it is, you have that opportunity ahead of you. That being said, in midyear, we do not have the same marketing. If you think about the way food is marketed, for example, if you think about the budget that is given to McDonald's and how much, or I guess McDonald's has created that budget for itself, its marketing budget, and you think of all the millions of people in the world who are interested in lining up for McDonald's as a result of all that effective marketing, and you compare that to the marketing that you might see around carrots. I mean, really, who is out there spending millions of dollars, billions of dollars advertising carrots? Not that many people. And so if you look at kids and you think, okay, you're going to go for the carrot, you're going to go for McDonald's, you might go with the product that has the better marketing. And so mid-July, mid-June, we don't have a lot of marketing typically about what you want to do to set yourself up for success for the rest of the year. In its place, and this is the second reason, is the focus on summer. Right? I think so many of us work really, really hard through the winter months, and the promise that we have to look forward to is that we're going to have summer. I mean, this is something that starts when you're in school. You look forward to June, just like my kids are doing right now, because at the end of June, you get out of school, you've got 2 months where you're expected to do nothing productive, and you can save all your energy and all your productivity for September when things get back. People go back to work, kids go back to school, students go back to school. So there's this gap. There's this big buildup. And in the middle of June, beginning of July, no one's really focused on the end of the year. They're focused on having fun right now. So this all works against the idea of having mid-year resolutions or a mid-year reset. And as a result, what we do is we kind of drift into summer. We're excited about summer. We don't plan a lot in terms of our goals around that time. And we enjoy the summer as much as we possibly can. And we try not to think about all the work that's going to be waiting for us. And then September rolls around and it hits us like a ton of bricks. All the meetings that were pushed off because of vacation calendars and schedule and summer schedules, they all get scheduled smack dab in September. And you spend your September, October, November, December catching up on all the lost time, trying to get things done before the year wraps up. And it is a crazy period of time. And so what we've created is a very reactive fall. We create a lot of hustle leading up to the new year once again, and the cycle continues. So what I am proposing is, instead of following the cadence of extreme resolutions in January with a giant, sorry, I'm kind of exaggerating here, the enthusiastic goal setting in January, followed by perhaps not as much goal setting in the middle of the year, with a big rush to finish off the end of the year, beginning in September, what I'm going to propose is that we mark the middle of the year. We give the opportunity, the space, we give you the opportunity and the space to take some time to reflect and to pause and to recalibrate so that you can plan for the next 6 months of the year, so that you can take some steps over the summer months that will set you up for success in September, in the fall, and for the months that follow, so that by the time you hit December 31st, you have reached the goals that you've set for yourself. You have done that, and you've done it in a way and at a pace that feels good, that feels sustainable, that doesn't have you kind of going from drifting in the summer to an extreme rush in the fall. So, are you with me? Are you interested in hearing the suggestions that I have? Because I am excited to share them with you. Basically, it involves asking yourself a lot of questions. And as I mentioned, I'll be doing a webinar on June 15th, and I would love for you to join me because we can do this work together. On top of that, you can do this work to prepare. We will be doing different work, but same themes. So you can prepare for that. You can listen to this podcast episode and pause as you go through the questions. But the idea here is to be very introspective and to do an assessment of 5 different areas. So I'm going to share those with you, and I'm going to share questions with you in relation to each of those areas. So just to give you the heads up, we're going to look at the facts. We're going to look at your goals. We're going to look at your strategy. We're going to look at how you want to spend your year, and then finally, who you want to be throughout this process. So starting with the first section, the first area, it's assessing the facts. So when you arrive end of June, beginning of July, what I would invite you to consider doing first is just to get the lay of the land. And this means asking yourself what the facts are currently. We don't need to know your opinions about the facts quite yet. Those do matter. But right now, all we really need is the data. So, for example, if you track your hours, you're doing billable hours, that's a very ascertainable number, right? That is a fact right there. So you might look at that. If you have income goals, you might look at your income, the revenue that you've generated over the course of the year. Those are facts. There's some numbers that you can look at. What are your expenses if you're looking at it from that perspective as well? You might also ask yourself what kind of work you're doing. If you look at the projects that you've had on your desk, the files that you've worked on, the clients that you've been working with, if you look at the non-billables or promotional activities that you've been engaged in, what does all of that look like? So if you were to take an inventory of your practice based on the last 6 months, what would you be reporting on? You might also look at the growth that you've experienced in your practice over the past 6 months. You might look at it relative to the beginning of the year. You might look at it relative to where you were this time last year, or maybe going a couple of years back. But here, the first question is really to ask yourself, what do the facts look like currently? Now, the next question that you're going to want to ask yourself is, where are you in terms of your goals? So if you made goals at the beginning of the year or at some point before this period, then I would encourage you to revisit what those goals are. So if you have them written down somewhere, then go and find those goals. If you don't have them written down, but you've got them in your head, write them down. So really what we're doing here is getting you familiar with the goals that you've already set for yourself. Now, you can park those, because we're going to start the exercise fresh. If you put those to the side for the moment and imagine that this is a completely fresh chapter, that there is nothing that is holding you back, you haven't committed to anything so far, ask yourself what you would most love to accomplish between now and the end of the year. So what would you love for the end of the year to look like? What would you love to have accomplished by December 31st, 2023? Write it all down, get it out on paper, take the time that you need to answer this question, because that is going to help you shape and recalibrate if you need to make any modifications to the goals that you'd set earlier. So when you've done that exercise, ask yourself whether or not your goals have changed. And if so, in what ways have your goals changed? And when it comes to moving forward, are there goals that you need to add? And are there goals that you want to let go of? And what you want to do here is to clarify exactly what it is that you want to have as your goals for the balance of the year. That is your end product when you've gone through this exercise. Now, moving on to the third question, we talked about strategy. And whatever it is that you have done over the past 6 months to get to where you are now, that is your strategy. So think about what it is that you've done that you are doing right. What is it that has allowed you to get to where you are right now? So again, go back to the list at the beginning. Now, look at what you've written down. Look at the areas where you have accomplished exactly what it is that you wanted to accomplish. And first of all, let's congratulate you and appreciate all of the work that you've put in already and all the accomplishments you've already successfully achieved. You need to celebrate those things, and I am here to celebrate those things with you. So big, big round of applause. Yes, you are well on your way to a successful year. And when we look at those elements of what you've already accomplished, where you've already had success, I invite you to think about the strategies that you have been using in order to create those successes. So strategies that you may already be engaging in might be your planning. It might be your execution. It might be your ability to manage your calendar. It might be that you are delegating to members of your team. You might be building your team. You might be triaging at the outset in terms of the projects that you take on and the ones that you do not take on. You might be setting really clear boundaries with others in terms of expectations and what you will do and what you will not do. you might be acting on feedback. You might be actively soliciting feedback and then acting on that feedback and growing at a rapid pace. So ask yourself, what are the strategies that you are using that are allowing you to build the success that you've already built over the course of the year? And my invitation to you would then be to think about, how is it that I can take my winning strategies and build on those further? So is there a way? Are there ways that you can take the strategies you've been using and increase your use of them to create even more success over the next 6 months? Now, I would also invite you to look at what is not working. Now, if you go to your list of what you've accomplished, and maybe if you do that assessment, you'll see where you are falling short in terms of where you want to be in your goals. Now, there are many reasons why you may fall short on goals. Sometimes it's that you realize that the goal that you set actually is not that important to you. It's not a goal for this year, perhaps. And so if that's the case, you can take that goal and you can push it away. You can push it into 2024. You can push it to some other time frame. You can let it go altogether. You do not need to keep a goal just because you wrote it down. If it's something that no longer resonates with you, it no longer makes sense to you, then you may thank that goal for the role that it played in your development in terms of where you are today, and you can let that goal go. Now, if it's a goal that isn't where you want it to be, but it's a goal that you really do think is important and you want to stick to that goal over the course of the year, then let's keep that goal and look at the reasons why maybe it is that you're not reaching that goal. Common reasons that I see for lawyers who don't reach their goal. Number one is time. It's the time that is invested in actually focusing on that goal and putting in the work toward that goal. So this comes up very often for lawyers who are looking to transition in their careers, and they want to do it. They know they want to do it, but they keep pushing it off because they're busy. They have lots that's going on in any given day. And so that goal gets pushed. If you've listened to previous podcast episodes where I've talked about setting priorities, there's a very helpful concept. It's the Eisenhower matrix, where priorities are characterized based on importance and urgency. And so we tend to deal with matters that are important and urgent. For example, if your leg is broken, you're going to take yourself to the hospital. Ideally, somebody else will take you to the hospital, and you're going to deal with it because it's important and it's urgent. And what often happens in life is that we also end up spending time on matters that are urgent and not important. So they might seem important, but if you boil down to it, it really isn't that important. And yet you spend your time on it because it is urgent. There are also matters that are not urgent, not important. And those too sometimes creep in and take over our calendars. And then finally, the area that I want to really highlight is the not urgent and important category. When people procrastinate, that is the category that gets pushed off the most. So you know it's important, but it's not as urgent as something else. And so it gets pushed off and it doesn't get done. So when I see lawyers who haven't reached their goal, typically it's because it's a goal that's important to them, but it may not rank as high in relation to other goals that others have that they share. So urgent work assignments, for example, trials, closings. If you've got kids, they're urgent matters. So your priorities sometimes can take a back burner. And so here is probably the biggest source of lawyers not reaching their goal. Other reasons why you may not be reaching your goal, sometimes it's fear. It's the concern of putting yourself out there. It's taking a risk. It's giving up something that you have for something that you don't yet have and not knowing if that's going to be a smooth or successful transition. Sometimes it's resources, feeling like you don't have enough resources to support you. So there's all sorts of reasons why you may not be reaching your goals. And it's important to get a handle on those because those are strategies that are not working for you. And so if you want to take those goals and achieve success in relation to them by the end of the year, what you'll want to do is think about how those strategies are not working and what strategies you could adopt that would allow you to create more success. So looking back at some of the questions that you'll ask when it comes to recalibrating your strategies, number one is, what are you doing right and how can you do more of that? What is not working? And how do you do less of that? What do you need to change? What do you need to let go of? Now, the next area where I'd invite you to ask yourself some questions. So imagine here we are, we're basically at the middle of the year and you're looking out to the next 6 months. And chances are you've had an experience, and I know you've had an experience of 2023 so far. If I were to tell you my experience of 2023, I would tell you it has been an incredible year. It has been really fun. It has been exceptionally busy. And I don't love using that word, but I frankly don't know a better word to describe it. It's been busy between my work engagements and my kids and, my somewhat social life when I can fit it in, and the other commitments that I have to my health, taking care of my family, all of that. When I look at the year, it really has been a blur. It's gone by very quickly. And I'm very happy with a lot of what I've done so far this year. I'm also very interested in recalibrating for the next 6 months, because the pace that I'm going at right now is a little bit quick for me. And I do want to recalibrate my work and add in a bit more family time, add in a bit more social and self-care time. So I'm looking at my next 6 months and thinking, how do I want these next 6 months to unfold? Do I want it to be at the same pace? Do I want it to be at a different pace? And what does that look like at a more granular level? So for you, I'd invite you to think about what the last 6 months have looked like for you. Has it been really busy? Has it been really slow? Are you doing what you love? Do you need a bit of a pause here? And ask yourself what it wants to look like. So the next question will be, because I know we're going into summer. This is not like the new year where everybody hits the ground running in January and everybody's off to the races. Traditionally, this is a time of year where things slow down. So instead of slowing down in the sense of slowing down without being intentional, what I invite you to do here is to slow down with that intentionality. So we're going to take advantage of this summer. We're going to maximize our downtime. We're going to recharge, refresh, spend time with our friends and family. And we're also going to be strategic to plant the seeds, to get things going, to understand what our plan looks like so that we can enjoy the summer. We can really enjoy it. And when September rolls around, it's not that traditional ton of bricks. We will be ready for it. We'll have paced it out. We will know what to expect. So that is how I would like to spend my next 6 months. And I would invite you to think about how you want to spend your next 6 months. So how can you use your summer months to refresh and recharge and lay the groundwork for you to finish your year strong? And when you look at the big picture, when you take that 6 month time frame and look at it objectively, how can you pace your year to create the results that you want without a bunch of overwhelm when you hit the fall? That was number 4. So we've gone through 4 categories so far, just reading those back. We've got assessment of the facts, and that includes where you've had success and where you might feel like either you have not had success or you don't have the success that you want, in which case let's re-examine our strategies or put that goal, whatever that goal was, off or lose it altogether. We talked about assessing your goals. So what were your original goals going into the year? If you set those, if you were to set your goals starting today, what would those goals look like? What really matters to you now? And how do you want to set your goals going forward? Do you need to change your existing goals? Do you need to recalibrate? The next question is about strategy. So where do you want to recalibrate your strategy, lean into what's working and let go of what's not? Number 4 was to decide proactively how you want to spend the balance of your year. And then 5, finally, is to decide who you need to become. So when you think about yourself on December 31st, you're there, you're about to call in the new year, maybe you've set up some fresh new goals for 2024. Who do you want to be? Who is that person and how is she different from who you are today? You might ask yourself, what would be the most satisfying thing you could say to yourself on December 31st, 2023? What would make you the most proud of yourself on that day? You might also take yourself to that point in time. Imagine that we are there already. Imagine that you are her. Maybe she sets better boundaries. Maybe she's more decisive. Maybe she's more confident. Maybe she has a much clearer picture of where she's going. Maybe she has a new job, new responsibilities, a bigger team. She's delegated more. She's hit her income goals. She's hit her targets. So whoever that version of you is at the end of the year, Imagine yourself in her shoes and go back and ask yourself some of these same questions that we have been going through in today's episode. So really looking at what does she have to say about where you're at today? What does she have to say about your goals going forward? What does she have to say about the strategy that you're engaging in? And what does she have to say about how you want to spend your year? Now, if you go through this exercise, if you take the time mid-year to reflect and evaluate and recalibrate, what you'll find is that you'll feel more focused. You'll have greater clarity and you'll have renewed energy for the year to come. You'll feel more at peace over the summer because you'll know that you're ready for the fall. You won't have that dread in the back of your mind about what's going to hit you when September rolls around. You'll feel lighter because you'll appreciate what you've already had. Like you'll appreciate your success. You'll be able to look at the year with satisfaction of what you've accomplished to date. And you'll be able to build on what's already working, all the while letting go of those things that are no longer working for you and that may be holding you back. So you can imagine if you have one of those half goals, right? It's a goal that you set, you're kind of working on it, but you're not fully committed. And every once in a while you think about it and it kind of puts you in a bad mood. If you could just let go of that goal, if you could just park it for 2024, or if you could instead commit the resources to actually executing on that goal and then have the satisfaction of getting it done, you'll feel better. Either way, whether you let it go or you jump into it, you will feel better. The skills that you'll need, number one, you'll need to set aside the time. You'll need to be willing to take some time to sit down and strategize. And there's a wonderful window. You can share it with me, June 15 at noon Pacific time. You can join me for that webinar and we will work through some of these questions, similar questions together, and you'll have that time of reflection that you need to reset and set yourself up for success for the balance of the year. You also need to be honest with yourself when you're answering these questions. Try to answer them from a place of groundedness, from a place of clarity and honesty with what you truly want, instead of falling into maybe default pattern thinking where you've been on autopilot and you think it's what you want, but you haven't really checked in with yourself recently to confirm that yes, indeed, that is the case. You'll need the courage to let things go if you decide that there are things that you want to say goodbye to at this point of the year. You may need to have the courage to do that. And finally, you'll need the discipline to focus, to actually sit down. This work can be really fun. It can also be quite challenging. And so it may require a certain amount of discipline to sit down and to ask yourself these questions, to answer these questions, and then to formulate a plan going forward. The results that you'll create, well, you'll reach your goals and perhaps you will come up with the birth of a brand new tradition, which of course would be this mid-year recalibration, this mid-year reset. Now, thank you for joining me today. I hope that today's episode has given you a lot of food for thought, that you are now mindful or more mindful, I should say, and really interested and keen to think about what the balance of the year has to offer you. As I mentioned multiple times, yes, I would love for you to join me at the webinar. So there is that opportunity. And of course, there is my 6-month group coaching and mastermind program. If that's something that is of interest to you, it is a wonderful container to go through these exercises, to really spend the focus on setting up your goals, on doing the work 1 month at a time, one topic at a time, so that where you end up at the end of December is aligned with the goals that you have for yourself and that you get to become that person who has achieved those goals. So, my dear friend, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope to see you on the webinar on June 15th and in the group program, if that's what you choose to do. If you have any questions about either, do feel free to reach out. And in any event, I am just grateful that you're here. Thank you for joining me, and I'll look forward to reconnecting again next week. Bye for now. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. Your feedback will help me create a podcast that's tailored to your needs and goes straight to the heart of what matters to you. For instructions on how to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com/podcast launch. See you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. If you want more information, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com. See you next week.